Do you ever get the feeling that advanced civilizations existed long before us, but we just haven't found a solid proof to back it up yet? Buckle up, because we're going to change that. The earliest modern human skull we've found dates back to 320,000 years ago. Based on that fact, we know Homo sapiens, as intelligent as you and me, have walked on our planet for at least that long. For scale, our current civilization began roughly 6,000 years ago. Archaeologists consider societies as a civilization only if that society has discovered permanent agriculture. But this is far from the only way to sustain a civilization. There could have been previous permanent settlements based on farming or fishing. We know that such settlements exist even today in the Amazon rainforest. Regardless, this is what our civilization did 6,000 years ago to settle somewhere. We discovered agriculture. We started living in one place. The big mistake of mainstream history is believing that for 300,000 years, humanity was hunter-gatherers who traveled from place to place non-stop. And then, after 300,000 years of aimless roaming passed, we discovered agriculture. And after we settled in one place, because we no longer had to work so hard for food, we could focus on other things, and our knowledge skyrocketed. After that, it took us only 3,000 years to go from stone hammers to swords, and then just 3,000 years more to start building airplanes and skyscrapers. So according to mainstream history, in this huge period of time, humans as smart as you and me just run around the world hunting deer instead of trying to find a better way to live. So first, science claimed there is no physical proof of agriculture or advanced civilizations before 6000 BC. But we've seen that year change at least 10 times. First we found Jericho, a city that is 9,000 years old. Then we found Göbekli Tepe, dating back 11,000 years ago. So how long are we going to lie to ourselves that there were no previous civilizations before 6000 BC? But did you know that there is evidence of agriculture not 6 but 23,000 years ago? During the Ice Age, a group of people living in Israel were already doing early farming. At a site called Ohalo 2, archaeologists found the remains of simple huts, grinding stones, and even storage pits. They also discovered wild wheat, barley, and other edible plants. They found more than 90 types of gathered plants there in total. And there were structures that were meant for storage, for permanent storage, and they had a long usage history. These people were clearly gathering and processing grains, probably grinding them into flour, and storing them for later. And since the facilities were permanent, they weren't nomads. This was a civilization. What's important here is not what we found, but why we could find it. This archaeological site is so remarkably well preserved because of a perfect storm of natural conditions that created a kind of prehistoric time capsule. Ohalo 2 was rapidly submerged by the rising waters, which buried the site under layers of lake sediment. The low oxygen, waterlogged conditions prevented decay and preserved everything. They preserved even footprints for over 20,000 years. Yet, historians continue to claim there was no previous civilization before Göbekli Tepe. But I just gave you the proof. And there is a very good explanation as to why they haven't found anything large-scale aside from Ohalo dating earlier than 10,000 years ago. And it's not because civilization wasn't there, it's because it's almost impossible for any human creation to persist for over 10,000 years. And Ohalo is just a very unique case in which the lake preserved the archaeological site intact. If we die today, in just 10,000 years, there would be no trace of us, no trace of humanity aside from bones. None whatsoever. We think that our building materials like concrete and metal last for long, but they don't. Within less than 100 years, our wooden homes would rot and collapse. Within 400 years, glass would fracture and turn to sand. Within 500 years, even the most durable metals like steel would rust and turn to ash. Concrete, which we mistakenly assume is eternal, begins to crumble after just a few hundred years. It completely collapses after less than 1,000 years. Plastics, while more persistent, still break down under sunlight and microbes. Any kind of plastic degrades beyond any recognition within 1,000 years. It gets lost in the soil. Even skyscrapers would buckle as metal reinforcements corrode, and they would turn to giant hills. After 10,000 years, the only thing that we might find of humanity is parts of subway stations. But to the average archaeologist, we would vanish forever. And in another 30,000 years, subway stations would disappear as well, because of tectonic activities. So, if there was an advanced civilization that lived in the past before us, if it was any earlier than 30,000 years ago, we would have no way of finding them. No way. And here comes another very important question. If there was such a civilization, how did they vanish if they were advanced? Where did they go? I'm sorry to bring the bad news, but our Earth resets human civilization every 20 to 30,000 years. And no matter how advanced our society is, it collapses every time, very easily. Take a look at the global major extinction events that have happened since humanity started. I have listed just the 7 major extinction events, but there are hundreds of local ones like meteorites, explosions, smaller volcanoes, floods that I didn't mention. Every few thousand years, either a supervolcano erupts, glaciers melt out of nowhere and flood the world, or it's the magnetic field that changes and the sun fries everyone alive. And I almost forgot, there was an aridity crisis where there was practically no water to drink for almost 1,000 years. I'm sorry again to bring the truth up, but statistically speaking, we have around 10,000 years until our current civilization disappears too. Take a look at the timeline of humanity. Just 12,000 years ago, the Younger Dryas happened. Glaciers melted in one day. They unleashed colossal floods across the planet. Ocean levels surged. The seas swallowed entire coastal regions. Any humans near the shores, along the rivers or by the sea, drowned. Imagine Miami, New York, LA, and San Francisco all gone in one day. This reshaped the entire world. And it wasn't that long ago, 12,000 years. The next day after the Younger Dryas started, global temperatures plummeted. It started snowing in the summer. Crops failed, animal herds vanished. Entire cultures like the Clovis in North America disappeared. It was a reset that happened in 2 days. And it was the last major reset. After this thing happened, it took us around 6,000 years to rediscover our agriculture and settle again. So on average, we can say that under very bad conditions, it takes around 5,000 years for a civilization to form again after a major disaster. And this last small apocalypse is nothing compared to the supervolcano that erupted just 20,000 years before that in Italy. Back then, 99% of humans disappeared in the matter of 10 years. The entire climate shifted. Most scientists believe this event is what led to the infamous bottleneck in human population that shrunk humanity to just a handful of survivors. This is the event believed to have wiped out Neanderthals. And just under 10,000 humans survived. Can you imagine? 10,000 humans? The entirety of humanity? And this was just 40,000 years ago. What about the other 280,000 before, in which humans somehow persisted? Well, 30,000 years before that, an even bigger supervolcano erupted in Asia. It was so huge that it forced humans to migrate from Africa to Europe, and we can't really estimate how many survived, but it was believed to have been around only 1,000 people living on the entire planet. Then, a few thousand years before that, there was the Paleolithic aridity crisis. It was almost impossible to find water. And then, just 30,000 years before, an entire Ethiopian valley turned into a massive volcano and destroyed practically everyone living in Africa. Again, 32,000 years before this one, a glacial maximum hit, and it froze everyone to death. And 60,000 years before, there was a huge volcanic crisis in Africa, the largest ever. You see the list. And I purposefully didn't add the hundreds of comets and meteorites that have crashed on Earth, each causing 500 times larger explosions than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. It's obvious that if we met an event of this level, our current civilization would vanish as well. If the Toba supervolcano erupted today, more than 90% of Earth's population would starve to death within the same year. Society would collapse, wars would happen, we would reset again. The only thing that would remain of our society would be our nuclear waste. Everything else will be untraceable after just 10,000 years. So, unless a prehistoric society somehow developed nuclear powers, we have no way of detecting them. But believe it or not, there are remnants of an ancient nuclear power in Africa. So there might have been a previous civilization that matched our current levels of technology. Geologists call this rock right here the Oklo reactor. It's located in Gabon in Africa, and it's the remains of a billion-year-old nuclear power plant. Before you think I'm crazy, let me tell you the story. We know it was a reactor because the isotope ratios found at Oklo are absolutely identical to those produced in modern nuclear power plants. Nothing else on the planet Earth produces these isotopes. No natural process ever has. We have no clue who built it, because a billion years ago, the only thing alive on Earth were bacteria. Or so we think. So the chances of this reactor happening naturally are very close to zero. And this is far from the only proof that this power plant is artificial, because the uranium inside it misses a special isotope called uranium-235, which means someone depleted the uranium-235. It's exactly the same isotope we use in nuclear power plants today. The only way for this isotope to disappear is if a nuclear reaction actually happened. So something was using it as fuel a very long time ago, and all of this is very well documented. Now, returning to more recent events, most researchers believe a very malicious myth. They think our current civilization developed because of the Ice Age ending. But the Ice Age wasn't so bad for humanity. The 7 extinction events were. In fact, of the past 300,000 years, 90% was Ice Age. And a common misconception is that during an Ice Age, everything is frozen and there is no food. But that's not the case. Surprisingly for most, much of the world during the Ice Age was not covered in ice. And most places were surprisingly green and rich in resources. The entire regions of Africa, Middle East, Asia, and almost the whole of Europe were ice-free. During such an ice age, sea levels are lower by around 100 meters, which means there is more land around the seas like the Mediterranean to inhabit. Here's where it gets really interesting. Our current civilization took roughly 6,000 years to develop from the supposed invention of agriculture to complex societies like ancient Sumer. Let's be conservative and say it takes 5,000 years on average for humans to develop an advanced civilization. If we map out the major warm periods since anatomically modern humans first appeared 320,000 years ago, we find at least 5 periods where the climate was perfect for civilization to flourish. Each of these periods lasted much longer than the 5,000 years we know it takes to build a civilization. So mathematically speaking, we should expect to find a minimum of 5 advanced civilizations before our own. And this is exactly what some ancient texts quote, that we're the 5th, 6th, or 7th civilization. Now, I don't want to take ancient texts as proof, so I will be looking for previous signs of agriculture, because this is what science is looking for. Remember these early settlers that were harvesting plants in Israel 23,000 years ago? Well, they weren't the earliest humans that have settled with agriculture, because we know for a fact that 100,000 years ago in South Africa, even earlier humans were processing plants. Archaeologists working at Sibudu Cave discovered plant starch residues on stone tools. These starches came from underground storage organs like tubers and rhizomes, and that indicates that they were harvesting plants on a large scale and they were processing them by peeling, pounding, and cooking them. The presence of these residues suggests the use of grinding tools and fire hearts to make the food more digestible, and evidence shows it was done over many seasons in the same cave. So these people were not traveling. They were living in the same cave. They were a civilization that inhabited one region and farmed. So there it goes. Not 6 and not 23, but over 100,000 years ago, someone was doing basic agriculture in the middle of the Ice Age. And this is a peer-reviewed and accepted statement published in 2008 in the Journal of Archaeological Science. So what happened to these advanced societies that were using agriculture so early in human history? Why didn't they develop rockets like we did? Why did they vanish? If we look at our timeline, you can see that not long after the first basic agriculture emerged, well, I think it emerged much earlier, but this is the earliest evidence we have. Well, not long after the agriculture first emerged, a supervolcano killed almost the entire population. Millions of people died. And let's be honest, if everyone dies today, would you be able to restart humanity and start agriculture from scratch? According to genetic material analysis, most scientists agree the human race was down to around 1,000 individuals, globally, not more. So imagine that if today's society collapses and only 1,000 random people survive, and they have to move away from the cities and migrate somewhere else because of a disaster. Would they be able to restart agriculture? I seriously doubt it, especially if there's sudden climate change. Would they rebuild society? Or would they just scavenge and live like savages? I think the answer is obvious. I'm Xuisoko, and thank you for watching Into the Unknown. If you like this deep dive into ancient societies, I'm sure you'd also like my video on the ancient nuclear power plant that I just mentioned in this video. I believe it might have been used by someone else, probably not humans, to jumpstart the life on our planet. Check out the video, see you there.